the 4 or 5 most common types are the so-called little grays, who are 3.5 to 4 feet tall, sometimes a little taller, big, large eyes, no ears, no hair, sort of pear-shaped heads, thin bodies. Sometimes there's a somewhat taller gray who's the leader or doctor seen on the ship. Then there are kind of reptilian ones that have scales that seem to be very functional and are rather scary looking, sometimes described as looking like praying mantises. Then there are tall, luminous ones that are aren't necessarily solid, which have a kind of more spiritual mission, often 6, 7 feet tall. Then there are humans, or more human-like beings that work along with the grays on the ship. And others have seen all kinds of other beings too, but that's just a brief capsule of the more common ones.
Well, what I remember at that time was I was playing on the back porch with my sister. I have an older sister who's 2 years older than I am. And my father, it was a dairy farm, and my father had finished milking the cows, and he was coming up from the barn to the house, and I had gone off the porch out to greet him. And as I went off of the porch, I turned to my right where the back of the house was, and I saw a horrifying face on the wall. And I remember I immediately turned to my dad because I wanted to see if he saw it. There was no response from him, but then when I turned back to the face, it was like the eyes of this thing on the wall just penetrated me. I was paralyzed. Then the next thing I remember was turning back to my father, and he was kind of, he was startled, and I was frightened, and he would ask me, "What are you scared of?" And he's kind of, laughing a little bit, and I said, "Well, Dad, did you see the face on the wall?" And he said, "No, I don't see anything." I said, "Well, somebody was there with a Halloween mask or something." And he said, "I didn't see a thing." Then the next thing I remember, we went into the house, and then my dad made the comment that, well, it took a lot longer to milk this evening than normal, but I started the regular time, and he couldn't figure out where the time went. There was like 30.
Stay with me here. Something in the individuals can be paralleled in the culture. In other words, as the individuals go deeper into their own experience, acknowledge that it has some truth, even though it's a mystery, they don't know what it is, some kind of spiritual opening, some kind of expansion of the sense of self occurs, which is constructive, creative. And I think we could maybe do that in the culture. In other words, if we could just get beyond this, are they here, are they good, we're scared of them, what are they doing, let's shoot the messenger that tells us they exist, let's deny the whole thing. And
didn't you have to do that to write the book?
Yes, if I went through this too, and I think we could as a culture maybe, if we could acknowledge that maybe there are other intelligences out there. They may not take the form that we were taught in Sunday school, but maybe if we could admit there is some intelligence, that we are living in a universe that is not dead and lifeless, except on Sundays, but actually contains beings and spirits that all other cultures around the world know and have known, and our culture knew it until 300 years ago, that if we could admit that reality, maybe we could open to some kind of deeper experience of our own, learn to live in harmony more fully with other life forms here, and maybe some growth as a collective could take place.
Dave was just telling us how he believes aliens implanted something in his mouth and then maybe took it out. But this was not so unusual. From reading your book, it sounds like there are a lot of surgical implants being performed.
Yes, this may be one of the more dramatic examples, but case after case, the person will remember in hypnosis or without hypnosis that some kind of device was placed in their nose or in the vagina or in the penis in case of one man, and they feel that they've been tagged, much the way we tag animals in a herd when we want to be able to track them. It's the experience is that they are doing this so they can be found again, and sometimes they will abduct the person, remove the implant, as occurred in this example Dave gave, put in another device, but the idea behind this appears to be some way to monitor or keep track of the people that they're working with.
I've been out playing by myself, and I had my bike, which I was very fond of. It was my first bicycle. I'd got it when I was 5. And some kids I didn't recognize, hadn't really seen the area before, invited me to go play with them in their fort. And it was supposedly underground, and I climbed down inside, and once I was in there, I realized that they weren't kids at all. And I was very frightened. But they reassured me that everything would be all right, and I could just go look around. They would show me around. But what they did was led me into a room, put me on a table, take my clothes off, and start an exam. And it's at that point that my memory faded until I was back in the entryway, and they told me I could leave and it was time to go. And when I climbed out of the ladder, I was no longer at the north end of the neighborhood. I I was right across the street from my house, and my mother was standing there really wondering where I was and why I had left my bike clear at the other end of the block.
One of the eerier things I've heard is what happened to you just a few months ago with what happened in your mouth. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, it's kind of a gory thing. I mean, I'm not going to get into the gory parts of it,
come
on. It was frightening. It was very frightening to me. I went out with a friend of mine early in the morning. We played 9 holes of golf. I came back in to get cleaned up, and for the last 3 days, I had this piece of skin in my mouth that I'd been messing with my tongue, and I noticed that it was a white piece of skin across the bottom of my mouth, and my mouth was a little sore, but I didn't pay that much attention to it. So what I did, I took a pair of tweezers, and I just pulled a piece of skin that was loose, and it came open. And I mean, it really came. I'm not going to get into the whole gory part of it, but it came open. I got the bleeding stopped. I went right to my office. I told the people in the office I had called and made an appointment with my physician, who's an internist. I showed it to a couple of the people in the office. It was really bad. And then I went to the doctor's office. He looked at it, and the first thing he asked me, he said, "Have you had mouth surgery recently?" And I said, "No, not at all." And he said, "Well, it's cut, and it's been cut very precise with a very sharp..."
Like with a surgical instrument.
Right, like with a surgical instrument. And I'll never forget this. He took his bifocals off. He sat down on the bench. And he says, "Well, then I don't know what happened." And I tell you, for me to inflict injury on myself, I've been through C-sections with my children and passing out. I see a needle, I pass out. I see blood, I pass out. I was having a hard time dealing with this.
So what do you think it was?
Well, the next thing I knew, 5 days later, the skin graft was back over it again, and in 3 days it healed up. But I went back through another regression to find out, I had to find out what happened. And during that regression, the tall aliens came in, cut my mouth open, and they took a small gray cylinder-like type of device out of my mouth. And there's a place there down next to my jaw inside my mouth that had always been there. It's been there for. I remember when I was in my 20s, I had a dentist look at it. He said it's just part of the bone, but it's not part of the bone. It's gone.
Hypnotherapist Sharon Philippe fits that bill. Sharon says aliens have been contacting her since she was just a tiny baby, and in fact it goes back really to infancy, doesn't it, Sharon?
That's true.
Tell us about the very first one you can recall, and how were you able to call it to mind later?
I have been involved, as you just said, throughout my lifetime, but I didn't really become aware of the entire issue till I had an actual UFO sighting only 25 feet away and 50 feet up off the ground when I was a teenager.
As an adult or as a teenager?
As a teenager. And that's when my recall started coming back of some unusual events that happened to me when I was a child. Originally, I thought my earliest experience was when I was 3. Because I remembered seeing this tall being holding my hand, and I had to ask my mom what the outfit I was wearing, how old was I, because I knew I was really little. And then I had done some work on myself and discovered that I was in a bassinet looking up at this blonde-haired woman who I've never seen before or after that in my entire life, and remember hearing the words that I will see you once again. To this day, I have no recollection of ever seeing this particular person again.
But this has affected your life, if seeing these beings when you were a child. It made you afraid of certain things, didn't it?
That's right. I was always very fearful of the dark. My mom used to have to cover the mirror at night because I used to see faces and people, I used to say, coming into my room. And so I had a very difficult time living what I would call a normal growing up life. In school, I was very quiet. I was a very introverted person. I didn't have much to do with other people. I kept to myself because I saw things that other people didn't see and was not aware of that.
So now do you think you were seeing actually beings as opposed to having a vivid imagination?
Absolutely. I'm positive of that.
Tell us about the encounter as a teenager, because that was much more vivid. Obviously, it left a lasting memory. Tell us about that encounter.
I was driving home. I had a Triumph Spitfire, which was a foreign car at the time, and it's only a bucket seat. It's only 2-passenger, and I was stopping at a 4-way traffic signal, Long Island, New York. And suddenly I just felt that there was a presence up above, and light was red, and I look out underneath from my window looking up, and I see this giant UFO standing there, the typical saucer-shaped UFO. And my heart starts pounding from here out to there. And I say to myself, you're not seeing what you think you're seeing. And this was in the 1960s. I was not a drinker, I never took drugs, I never smoked. I'm a very dull person in all those areas. And so I, knew that I wasn't hallucinating. I didn't have some source to see this.
Were you terrified?
I was very frightened. I wouldn't say I was terrified until I suddenly realized that the lights went on. At first it was very dark, but I could see the shape of it because it was above a street light. This was a residential area, so I was thinking that someone surely should see this and I should hear something about it on the news next day, but which I never did.
Did this go on then for you with some further or closer interaction with the people who were, or the beings who were aboard this vessel?
Yes, at the time I didn't realize that I had been on board, and it was later on uncovering information that I found out I actually did go on board with these beings, and there were other people that were on board there as well.
Other humans?
Other humans that had been taken on board.
You mentioned that one of them was a woman. You remember that from when you were a child, and you brought along some sketches. Do the aliens look different every time?
I have seen
I'll just be holding these up to the camera if we can see them at all.
The last one is not a picture, though.
Right, okay.
This particular being was an incident that I recently had within the past 2 years, which was a very warm, loving incident. This is one of my clients as a hypnotherapist has seen that. That is a lizard type. This was a very frightening experience, one of the rare few. This was actual bone structure around the eyes. The eyes had pupils, but you see they're different from the normal.
Didn't you see large, 6 foot tall?
I saw a 6 foot tall being, which was tan in color. I've seen ant-like beings, which were 3 feet or under in size. I would sometimes see them what I would call interdimensionally, because I would see them as silhouettes, and then I wouldn't remember the others.
What do you remember about personalities, or were you around them long enough to get an impression?
When different beings would come in, you would get a different sensation as to whether you should be fearful or not fearful. There were many times in my life that I was absolutely so terrified that I thought I was going to die before anything might even happen.
But you got these feelings with communication or because of communication, and what form would that communication take?
The communication comes through their eyes. They talk to you through their eyes. For me, at any rate. Some people hear communication as if they're talking telepathy.
Yeah, we've got some more people. We'll ask them how they communicate. That's interesting. I would have thought it was the same.
But with me, it's mostly through the eyes, all the emotions, all the understanding. And so with that in mind, when I had one incident which actually woke me up, I heard my name shouted in my head and woke me out of a sound sleep. And I saw a face. It wasn't the whole being. All I saw was a face. And this was a very frightening face. It had folds in the skin, and it had huge, large, black almond-shaped eyes, and they were like black liquid.
We've got to take a break right here. Sharon is not alone in her experiences.
I was very frightened. I realized very early on that they could manipulate me and they could keep control of me, and that if they did decide to harm me, there was nothing I could do about it, and I didn't want to see that come. I would quite often react like I tell people as an ostrich. I would stick my head in the sand, refuse to see or hear anything, and it wasn't there because I couldn't see it.
But for a while you thought you were nuts.
When I could no longer suppress the memories, I was telling myself over and over, God, let me be nuts. I don't want this to be happening. I don't want it to be real. And after several months of this frustration and not being able to deny all these experiences, I went and saw a psychologist. And after 5 months, the psychologist kicked me out, told me there was nothing wrong with me. I was just having anxiety because I didn't want to deal with what had actually happened to me.
You wanted to say something?
We're often told, well, these are people who want to believe this. But far from wanting to believe it, I've seen many people that come to me wanting to have a psychiatric diagnosis, wanting to be told that they have a neurosis or even a psychosis, and become very disturbed when I say, no, I don't understand this. You're having these experiences, and I can't explain
They're
it or make
looking
it
for
go
some
away.
other explanation.
It's what I call the anything but syndrome.
Okay.
I went through it myself. I mean, I've looked at every other possible explanation as thoroughly as I can, and nothing plausible has emerged. I might say there is not in the literature, I always throw this out to audiences, there is not in the literature or among the reports a single case of alien abduction experience that has revealed behind it, upon examination, something else.
Okay.
A
Let me
large
introduce
craft
Cindy.
that at first I thought was a Chinook helicopter.
Okay.
Until I came up closer to it.
So you're putting, I mean, you're watching it?
Oh yeah.
Other cars around you?
There were no cars.
No cars,
Just me.
just you. At what point did you realize that, well, maybe this isn't a Chinook helicopter?
Well, when I first noticed it, it was rather odd because there were lights lighting up in a circular motion sequentially around the craft. And I could tell that it was about 50 to 60 feet from the ground because of the treetop level. And it was right on the right side of the freeway. And as I came closer to it, I was doing this process of elimination. Could it be a dirigible? Well, a dirigible moves somewhat. It does not
This was
stay
stationary.
It was completely stationary.
60 feet in the air? Okay, I'm just trying to stay with you here.
So at that point, when I realized it was stationary, and it was, I mean, just, it wasn't moving an inch. You could
Not
see
a
that-
dirigible, obviously not a plane.
Not a plane, so it could only be, what, a helicopter?
And so-
Possibly a stealth helicopter, you know.
No noise.
No noise. I rolled my window down, and I had my music on at first. I turned the music off, and with it being that close to the ground, if it had been a helicopter, you would have heard something. You would have heard the disturbance of the air from the blades. Even if it had been a stealth helicopter, at that close to the ground, I would have heard something or felt some kind of vibration, and there was nothing.
And then?
Then I came closer to it, and I saw that it was a sphere. It was probably 60 to 70 feet in diameter.
No, so at one point, was there a lapse in time here now?
No,
Something
as I came upon it, closer to it, I realized at that point it was none of those things. And it was not a helicopter. And that it was obviously something not
side
from
of the
here.
road.
Without meaning to rush you.
I had made up my mind. I was going to pull over off the freeway and get out and take a look at it. I'm very conscious of my body position when I drive. I had my left hand on the wheel and this hand back here to look, to pull over, and the next minute I was driving like this. And I verbally said out loud to myself, that was interesting. I never remember passing it. I was 10 miles down the road.
In spite of the fact that the people who come to me know that they're going to encounter some disturbing memories when they come up, they feel that they have a major part of their life that they're not in touch with, and people don't like that. They don't want to feel there's a whole secret life that they've been through that they can't get to. So what happens is, yes, there are some very disturbing things that happen in the hypnosis sessions. Memories come back that are sometimes overwhelmingly intense and disturbing, but as they come to grips with those memories, they become much more solid, sure of themselves. They feel that they have an ally in me. They meet other people who have been through the experiences. They feel less cut off and isolated. And the overall effect is a constructive one. You know, so it's like going through the dark night of the soul, in a sense, but coming to a place of making peace with the experiences.
We'll continue. Let's find out more about the therapeutic value.
You know, first of all, I've been with Dr. Mack for 2 years. And in the 2 years that I've worked with him, in going through my experiences, one of the things I've always told John is, I don't want my name mentioned anywhere. Well, then, I got to meet people in the support group. I got to find out more about what actually happened to me. I want to tell you something about this man that's sitting next to me. He went down to my farm in Missouri and met with my mom and dad, which was the most emotional experience that I ever had. A ship landed on the farm. It was very difficult to deal with. It was very frightening. We have dairy cattle that went through barbed wire fence. We had dogs that were frightened. That was a morning that we never forgot. But one thing we were told was not to talk about it, because this was back in 1962. We were told you would be classified as an idiot. People will not believe that you saw what you saw, even though there was a 30-foot circular burnt mark in the wheat field where it landed.
Back in 1982, just to summarise, you'd all been out to a nightclub, but you had not been drinking.
That's right.
This is hand on heart. You'd not been drinking.
That's right.
Well, you've been drinking Coca-Cola.
Yes.
Right.
That's all. Well, as we were travelling home, same journey as we did every week, we just saw some strange lights in the sky. That's all we thought it was to start with, except that the lights were extremely bright and you could see that the base of this craft or object was either round or oval.
And you all three of you saw it?
Yes, because we all drew what we saw about 2 weeks later when an investigator spoke to us about it.
What happened next?
The car lost power. We followed it down the road, it disappeared, and we reported it at the local police station because there was 3 of us. Had there only been 1 of us, we never would have done.
Yeah.
But because there was 3. Later on, about 2 weeks later, it was discovered that the journey had actually taken longer.
So hang on, so by the time you reported it to the police station, which seemed to you within minutes of you're actually leaving the nightclub,
Well,
actually you found that hours had passed.
Well, we didn't, but the investigator did when he came and interviewed us.
He saw a discrepancy between what you saw as the time scale and what the actual time was.
Because when we got to the police station, we looked at our watches, obviously thinking, oh, what are they going to think going in at this time in the morning?
Yeah.
And also because they logged the time that we went in.
So how did you discover what had happened in those lost hours?
Well,
tell us.
Oh, right. Harry Harris, solicitor from Manchester, who's a UFO investigator, got in touch with us and asked us whether we would agree to undergo hypnotic regression.
Right.
We were a bit sort of dubious about it, but we eventually agreed to go.
You went. Now, which of you? One of you had difficulty actually.
Yes, that was me.
Was that you?
Yes.
What did you, when you went under hypnosis? What did you remember?
Once you actually get through the conscious memory, the first experience was just to experience very strange body changes, of which frightened me, and they brought me out of it. The second time, they took me through that fear until I described being in a room alone and being extremely frightened, not knowing where Valerie or Vivian were. There was a doorway in the room and a table. They asked me to look through the door and I refused, and then I said I could hear someone coming, and I was extremely frightened, but I got onto the table. And they said, why are you getting on the table? And I said, because I know I've got to. And they said, how do you know? And I said, I just know. And then I was looked at by 6 robot-type creatures.
Robots?
Robots.
What,
That's how I did.
sort of robots with
No,
hands
they
and
were
arms?
definitely robots. They'd got no features, because they said, well, how do you know they're looking at you? And I said, well, I can tell that they're looking at me, because they didn't touch me or anything.
But what I mean is, were they robots built in the shape, in the rough shape, like a crash dummy, you know?
They got round type heads, round bodies on round coasters.
Right.
And that
Made
was
of
it.
metal?
Yes, yes.
So,
nothing about them that looked humanoid or anything like that.
But then 2 other beings, much more humanoid beings, came into the room.
No, that was with Valerie.
So your memories were kind of different.
Our stories were totally different at this point, all 3 of us.
Yeah. And what were the beings who came when you went into hypnosis?
They were sort of 6 foot tall. There was a male and a female. I've been asked, how did you know? And I thought, well, I just knew that they were male and female.
And the female tried on your shoes?
Yeah, well, they seemed very interested in my clothes, what I was wearing, and the female tried on my shoes.
Were they humanoid? Did they look like us?
Yes, apart from they got very...
we were there.
Their eyes were very sort of blue, bright blue.
Now, to come back to you, John, is that kind of experience, that although these 2 ladies aren't in your book, because obviously you did your research in America, is that a common story, this feeling of being examined somehow?
Yes, that part's common. The terror, the kind of pushing through the terror. The beings they're describing are not typical of the most common type in the United States, which tend to be smaller, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, with these huge black eyes.
That was what Vivian saw.
That's what Vivian saw.
Vivian saw.
So, but there are other types described, like taller, luminous ones, more robotic ones, like she described, are also seen, more reptilian.
So what conclusions are we drawing from this? If these people aren't hallucinating, if they're not part of some kind of mass psychosis, if they are experiencing something, what's your conjecture?
Now, of course, that's a 64 billion pound question. I mean,
we can't pay you for answering that.
I mean, I've finally come after thousands of hours. I was told for 2 years, don't say what you think here. Don't say what you think. Just say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, you know. But after a while, the pattern becomes so powerful, so dense, that the only thing, I mean, no kind of psychiatric illness, so not hallucinating, fantasying, some other kind of trauma, none of it begins to work, because you have the UFOs, you have the cuts, the scoop marks, the independent witnessing, the people are absent. So some kind of another intelligence seems to be trying to knock on our doors to get through to us.
Something here.
Like the crop patterns you have here, too.
Why do
This question comes up often, what is alien motivation and intention? And that's what we know the least about. The question presumes that in some way we accept the reality of it, and I think as we accept the reality of this phenomenon, whatever that means, in other words, whether it's from some other dimension entering our dimension, but something important is going on here, and we open to it, I believe that they will become less subtle. Right now, they fear us. we attack them when they show up. We are frightened of them. We try to, experiences actually swing their fists at them, try to knock them down. So they're worried about us. They paralyze us because they're doing things that are distressing to us, and then we, in turn, understandably, react with fear and aggression. So as we begin to open our spirits or open our souls to whatever reality this is, and when that happens with the people that I work with, they become less aggressive, they show up more powerfully, and maybe at some point they will allow themselves to be better known to us. But right now, they feel, or whatever this is, their intention is, I don't know, but they enter our world in a subtle way. They don't make themselves fully manifest. And I don't know why that is, except what I said.